All right, good morning, sixth grade. I've taken attendance so we can get started. Today's math lesson, we're going to be looking at our curriculum on Module 7, Lesson 1, which is relationships between two variables. So let's get started. Okay, let's get this party started here. By the end of this lesson, I expect you to be able to say these statements. I can determine the dependent variable and independent variable in a word problem. I can write an equation to describe the relationship between the dependent and independent variables. Okay, so let's talk about some words to know. So prior to even getting into this lesson today, we want to review a few words, just in case you've forgotten the meanings of them. One word is variable. So that's an important word we use to describe a letter that's used to represent an unknown number. So if we don't know a number or we don't know an amount quite yet, instead of putting a question mark, we can put the letter X. We could use the letter Y, the letter A. Any letter can be used from the alphabet. So a variable is a letter that's used to represent an unknown number. The second word to know is equation, another review word. Now, if we look in the middle there, we see EQUA, equation, and EQUA equals sign. They both start with the same four letters. So equation has an equal sign. An equation is a mathematical statement that shows that two mathematical expressions are equal. So just in case you've forgotten what a mathematical expression is, it's a combination of numbers, variables, and operators like addition, subtraction, multiplication, division that represent a value or a quantity. So we're looking at that equation as the mathematical statement that shows those two mathematical expressions are equal. Some examples we have here on this page is x plus 5 equals 6, t equals d plus 26, and y equals 25d. And I'd like to point out on that one, y equals 25d. We don't put an x for multiplication just because we do use that as a variable as well. So we just put the 25 and the d right next to each other, and that means 25 times d, just as a review there. Now, words to know, some new words to know from our lesson today. That's dependent variable and independent variable. So again, a variable is a letter used to represent an unknown number. Here we have a dependent variable, that's the y here. And the dependent variable is usually the total, the variable that depends on the value of another number. And then the independent variable is the variable that is controlled in a particular problem or scenario. It keeps changing with the situation. And then we also have constants, which are a value that does not change. So depending on what the situation is, we may also have constants in there. And we'll see some examples of these here shortly. So here's a first glance at steps for writing an equation. Because ideally at the end of this lesson, we want to be able to write an equation to represent the relationship between those two different types of variables. So we're going to go over the first step right now. At the beginning here, we say how to write an equation with independent and dependent variables, the relationship between them. So step one, find the independent and dependent variables. Okay, so let's start with that. Now, remember here when we are reading passages in math class, we are comprehending the word problem. So just like we do in reading class, we are reading to understand. We want to understand the problem so that way we can write a mathematical sentence to represent it. We want to know what it's talking about first. So a good way to do that is imagining yourself in the following situations when you're reading them. Daydream into the story. We went over this in detail, but just to recall and remember some math word problem solving strategies. Okay, so here's 3 examples of finding the dependent and independent variable. There's 2 examples that I'll be going over with you, and then you'll be doing actually 2 examples on your own. So find the independent and dependent variables. Example 1, video games are on sale for $25 per game. Ryan buys V video games for a total cost of C games. So the dependent variable is the total. So here at the end of this mathematical wording here, we see a total cost of C games. So total cost is what of the games is what we are looking for as the dependent variable. It will be all by itself on the equation, and then the independent variable along with some other numbers will be on the other side of the equal sign, which we'll be looking at here shortly. So the dependent variable is the total cost in this example here. And then the independent variable, the other letter here that we're looking at that's standing for an unknown number, is the videos that Ryan buys, the number of videos that Ryan buys. So if we look here, we can see number of video games that Ryan buys, and that's represented by V. That situation will keep, that'll keep changing with the situation. So she buys 2, she buys 3, she buys 4. That'll change then the total cost. Great. And then if we look at another one, Julio runs at a rate of 4 miles per hour. The total distance D that Julio can run is equal to the rate times the number of hours H. So the total distance, that's going to be the dependent variable. And then the independent variable would be the number of hours that Julio runs. Okay, and then now I'm going to have you do on Class Kick, example number 3, and then we also have a fourth one here. I'm going to give you time to work on that while I observe that, and then we'll go ahead and go over that. So I would go over that with the class at this time here. Go over. And I'd be able to check for their understanding as I'm watching them work on this independently. Okay. And now I would ask for any questions for them to raise their hand in our chat and then respond to any of those. Okay, now back to the lesson. We're going to revisit steps for writing an equation. We're going to add on steps 2 and 3 now. Okay, so we found the independent and dependent variables. Now, to write our equation, we're going to highlight any useful numbers or variables, which are letters, in the problem, and highlight in a different color, any keywords, like plus, minus, is equal to. And then we'll be able to write the equation for step 3 that describes the relationship between the variables. Just a reminder here, when creating equations, remember, what is addition? It's combining numbers or amounts. What is multiplication? It's repeated addition, repeatedly adding the same number. 8 plus 8 plus 8 plus 8 plus 8 plus 8, or 6 times 8. Okay, so creating the equation. Here's our example. Thomas has $30. He is going to pick up his paycheck. The total amount T Thomas will have is equal to the amount M he earns on his paycheck, plus the amount Thomas already has. So the dependent variable, the total, is the total amount of money Thomas will have. Then the independent variable is the amount he earns on his paycheck. Now, we're going to highlight our numbers, letters, and some important information. $30 is what he has. Total amount is T, equal to the amount M he has plus the amount he already has. So basically, we're going to take T and equal that to M, whatever the amount he earns on his paycheck, plus $30. So our equation will look like this. T equals M, the amount he earns on his paycheck, plus the $30 that he already has. And that will give us T, the total amount Thomas will have. Okay, example number 6. Jada owns a jewelry store. She uses 15 jewels per bracelet she makes. The total number of jewels, J, depends on the number of bracelets, B. So here, the total is jewels, the total amount of jewels. And then we have our independent variable, which is the other variable, the number of bracelets, B. So now we're going to write an equation. So she uses 15 joules per bracelet she makes. So 15, every bracelet is 15 plus 15 plus 15 plus 15. So here we're going to use multiplication because we're repeatedly adding those 15 joules for every bracelet she makes. And so that would equal J. So J equals 15B. There we go. And now I would have the students here go ahead and step 3, write an equation that describes the relationship between the variables, and I'd have them go onto an app like ClassKick, and so that way I could view what they're working on. And then they would go through and work on these examples on their own. And then I can also watch and make sure that they have those completed and their understanding, and check for understanding as they're completing that. Then I would have students help me and volunteer to help answer the questions here as we're going over them together. Another checking for understanding of those individual students. And then we then go over what to remember, steps for writing an equation. So 6th grade, how to write an equation with independent and dependent variables and the relationship between them. So step 1, we're going to find the independent and dependent variables, step 1. Then step 2, we're going to highlight any useful numbers or variables, letters in the problem, and highlight in a different color any keywords, plus, minus is equal to. And then step 3, we're going to write an equation that describes the relationship between the variables. Any questions? So at this time, I'd answer any questions that students may have. And then I would then have them do another little assessment here where I could then collect this data. So the first group, they would go to Schoology, then to Google Classroom, and then they click on Boom Cards, which are interactive task cards, and it will not allow the student to move on until they've correctly answered the card. So each problem, they have to keep working at it if they don't get it, and then once they come up with the answer, then they are able to then move on to the next one. They can skip over and go back to some if they're really stuck on one, but this will give me live data to see which students are really struggling, which ones are getting these correct. And then what I need folder in Google Classroom, that's a what I need for each student. That way they can be working on the individual needs within the classroom of what they need, what their scores are showing their weekend, their data, they can have that extra work there. And then I'll message that group with feedback from lesson data and the win folder. This group here in the middle, I would take into a breakout room and we'd first work on some more problems together, guiding them through that. And then they would go through the boom cards. And then the last group here, they do the boom cards, and then they would meet with me in the breakout room. I'd use the data from their boom cards to then look and see how they're doing, what they need to work on, what they missed and comment, and then they'd work on their what I need folder. Okay, thank you.